The rain drummed against Dominic Reed's apartment window, creating a hypnotic rhythm that matched his typing. The clock on his desk showed 2:17 a.m., but sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. 3 months had passed since Axiom Aerospace had fired him, calling his designs too theoretical and impractical. Now surrounded by unpaid bills and rejection letters, he worked desperately on a new propulsion concept that might salvage his career. "Just need to recalculate the quantum field stabilizer," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. The small apartment felt even smaller tonight, with stacks of technical journals creating narrow pathways between rooms. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he sipped it anyway, grimacing at the bitter taste. When the knock came, he assumed it was the building settling, or perhaps his neighbor Fredericks returning drunk again. But then it came again. 3 precise taps on his front door. Froze, glancing at his security panel. No one had buzzed from the lobby. "Who's there?" he called, approaching cautiously. Silence answered him. He peered through the peephole and saw nothing but his empty hallway. Hesitantly, he opened the door. Chain lock still engaged. The hallway remained empty for a heartbeat, before a woman stepped into view from beside his doorframe. She wore a silvery gray outfit that seemed to shimmer under the hallway lights, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders in waves that defied the humidity of the rainy night. "Dominic Reed," she said, her voice melodic yet firm. "I need your help. How did you get into the building?" he asked, not releasing the chain. "And who are you?" The woman smiled. "My name is Verena. It's for how I entered your building. That's part of what I need to explain to you." Something about her unnerved him, perhaps the unusual amber color of her eyes or the way she stood perfectly still. Almost unnaturally so, yet he felt no fear, only an overwhelming curiosity. "It's after 2 in the morning, he said. "Time is a luxury I don't have," she replied. Then, with a subtle movement, she slipped through the partially opened door despite the chain being engaged, not breaking it, but somehow passing through the impossible gap. Dominic stumbled backward. "How did you phase displacement?" Verena said calmly, now standing in his living room. "One of many technologies my people mastered centuries ago." "Your people?" His mind raced through possibilities, hallucination from lack of sleep, an elaborate prank, or perhaps he'd finally lost his grip on reality. Verena walked to his desk, studying the calculations on his computer screen. "Your work on quantum field manipulation is remarkably close to being correct. But you've made a fundamental error in your understanding of how subspace folds interact with normal matter." She tapped a section of his equations, and Dominic noticed. Her fingertips seemed to glow faintly from within. "I don't understand what's happening," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Verena turned to face him fully. "I'm not from your world, Dominic. I've traveled a very long way because you've created something that could save my civilization. But what you've designed has also drawn unwanted attention, dangerous attention, to your planet. You're claiming to be... what? An alien." "That term is imprecise but functionally correct," she said. "I appear human because it was necessary for this interaction, but my natural form would be unsettling to you." Dominic sank into his chair. "This is insane. I understand your skepticism." Verena held out her hand, and above her palm a small sphere of light formed, expanding into what looked like a miniature solar system with strange configurations. 3 months ago, you submitted designs for what you called a quantum resonance engine to Axiom Aerospace. They rejected it because they couldn't understand it. But others did understand, because the technology mirrors devices my civilization has used for interstellar travel. The holographic display showed his engine designs, then transformed to show a larger, more complex version with the same core components. "How do you have my designs?" "Those were proprietary. Your government confiscated them," Verena said. "They recognize the potential, even if they don't fully understand it. That's why I need your help. You must complete what you started." "Why would I help you?" Dominic asked, though part of him already knew he would. Verena closed her hand, extinguishing the hologram. Her expression softened as she looked at him with those strange amber eyes. "'Cause your world stands at a crossroads, Dominic Reed. What happens next depends entirely on you. And because, despite everything you've been through, You still dream? Of the stars? She walked to his window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. We don't have much time. By morning, they'll know I've contacted you. Who will? The people who took your designs? The people who've been watching you ever since? She turned back to him. Pack whatever you need. We leave in 30 minutes. Dominic's ancient sedan raced through the rain-slicked streets, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, occasionally glancing at Verena in the passenger seat. She sat, unnaturally still, her amber eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. Where exactly are we going? He asked, breaking the tense silence. Jefferson Observatory, Verena replied. It's remote enough for what we need to discuss, and the electromagnetic interference from their equipment will mask my energy signature. Dominic barked a laugh. Energy signature? What? You realize how crazy this all sounds? And yet you're driving me to an observatory at 3 in the morning, she countered with a slight smile. Part of you knows I'm telling the truth. The rain eased. As they left the city behind, winding up the mountain road that led to the observatory, the facility was closed to the public at this hour, but Verena directed him to a maintenance access road that circled behind the main buildings. Park here, she instructed as they reached a clearing that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. The clouds had parted, revealing a star-filled sky that seemed impossibly bright. They exited the car. Verena tilted her head back, studying the constellations with a look of longing. Your astronomers named that star Epsilon Eridani, she said, pointing to a faint point of light. Around it orbits my homeworld, Thalassa. It's over 10 light-years away, Dominic said. How did you distance is more malleable than your science currently understands? Verena interrupted. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small device that resembled a metallic seed. When she opened her palm, it floated upward and expanded, projecting a 3-dimensional star map around them. 200 years ago, my civilization discovered a network of what you might call cosmic shortcuts, pathways where the fabric of space-time naturally folds upon itself. The hologram zoomed in on a glowing point between star systems. We call them nexus points. They allow instantaneous travel across vast distances, like wormholes. Dominic asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding his skepticism. Similar in concept, but naturally occurring and stable. We built our civilization around them, establishing colonies on dozens of worlds. Her expression darkened. Then the nexus points began to fail. The hologram showed bright connections between stars winking out one by one. Without the nexus network, our colonies are isolated, dying. Millions of my people are stranded without supplies or hope of rescue. She looked at him intently. But then we detected something extraordinary, a new nexus point forming, right here in your solar system. The hologram zoomed in on Earth, showing a swirling energy pattern near the planet's outer atmosphere, your quantum resonance engine. Design, Verena continued, inadvertently contains the exact frequency pattern needed to stabilize this new nexus. You solved a problem our best scientists couldn't crack. Dominic shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. I was just trying to create a more efficient propulsion system. Genius often comes from intuition rather than calculation, Verena said. What? The hologram shifted to show men in suits confiscating equipment from what Dominic recognized as his former lab at Axiom Aerospace. Government agents seized everything 3 days after your termination. They've been attempting to reverse engineer your work ever since, but they lack your insight. What? Why would they care about my failed engine design? Because they detected the forming nexus too, Verena said grimly. Your world's governments are aware that something is happening in your outer atmosphere, even if they don't understand what. They fear invasion, so they're racing to develop technology that might protect them. And would they be wrong to worry? Dominic asked pointedly. Verena deactivated the hologram, plunging them back into darkness broken only by starlight. My people have no interest in conquest, Dominic. Wait. We're explorers and scientists. We seek only to save our stranded colonies and perhaps establish peaceful contact with your world. She hesitated. But there are others who monitor nexus formations. Less benevolent entities, Other aliens? Yes. And if your government continues their crude attempts to manipulate the Nexus, they may draw unwanted attention. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch unexpectedly warm. Help me complete your work properly. Save my people and protect yours in the process. Dominic stared at the stars, considering her words. What exactly would I need to do? First, we need to retrieve your original prototype, Verena said. The one you built before submitting your designs to Axiom. That's impossible, Dominic replied. It's locked in a high-security government facility by now. Verena's lips curved into a confident smile. Nothing is impossible with the right technology. I didn't come unprepared. Dawn broke over the horizon as Dominic and Verena observed the unmarked facility from a ridge half a mile away. The nondescript concrete building was surrounded by a chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire, with surveillance cameras mounted. At regular intervals, 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and military. That's where they took my prototype? Dominic whispered, peering through the binoculars Verena had provided. Level 3, Sublevel B, she confirmed. Your government calls it Research Station Omega. Officially, it doesn't exist. And you expect us to just walk in there? Verena reached into her bag and pulled out what looked like 2 silver discs, each the size of a coin. These are personal phase shift devices. They'll allow us to pass through solid matter for approximately 20 minutes before needing to recharge. Like how you got through my door, Dominic realized. Exactly. But there's a limitation. They won't work on certain energized materials, including the containment field around your prototype. She handed him one of the discs. Press the center when you're ready to activate it. What about the guards? Security cameras? The phase shift creates a visual distortion field. Will appear as nothing more than heat shimmer. She checked a device on her wrist. We have a 90-second window between security sweeps, and we need to move now. Dominic took a deep breath, pressing the disc as Verena did the same. A tingling sensation spread across his skin, and when he looked at his hands, they appeared slightly translucent. Stay close to me, Verena instructed, moving toward the facility with confident strides. They approached the fence, and Dominic hesitated briefly before following Verena's example and stepping directly through it. The sensation was bizarre, like pushing through thick gelatin that offered no actual resistance. They passed through the exterior wall just as easily, emerging into a sterile white corridor. This way, Verena whispered, consulting a holographic blueprint that hovered above her wrist device. They moved quickly through the facility, passing through doors and walls as needed, occasionally freezing as personnel walked by, oblivious to their presence. They descended to Sublevel B via a maintenance shaft, emerging into a high-security area with laboratories on either side. Through glass walls, Dominic could see scientists working on various projects, some of which looked disturbingly like weapons systems. There, Verena pointed to a sealed room at the end of the corridor. Inside, Dominic could see his quantum resonance prototype suspended within a transparent energy field, surrounded by monitoring equipment. How do we get past the containment field? He asked. We don't need to, Verena replied.
We just need
to modify the frequency it's operating on. She approached a control panel and produced another device from her bag. This will temporarily synchronize with their systems. You'll have 30 seconds to make the necessary adjustments to your prototype. What adjustments? You need to recalibrate the quantum field stabilizer to match this frequency. She showed him a complex mathematical equation on her wrist display. This will allow it to interact with the forming nexus. Dominic studied the equation. Would require rewiring the entire phase inductor assembly. Can you do it? He nodded slowly. I think so, but I'll need tools. Use these. Verena handed him what looked like metallic chopsticks, quantum manipulation instruments. They'll allow you to modify molecular bonds directly. Verena connected her device to the control panel, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The containment field flickered momentarily, then stabilized at a different frequency. Now, Dominic. 30 seconds. He reached through the altered field, feeling only mild resistance as he accessed his prototype. Using the strange tools, he began making adjustments that would have been impossible with conventional equipment. watching in amazement as components realigned at a molecular level. 10 seconds, Verena warned.
Oh.
Dominic made the final adjustment just as alarms began blaring throughout the facility. They've detected us, Verena said, her voice urgent. Is it done? Yes, Dominic confirmed, withdrawing his hands from the field. But how do we get it out of here? Verena smiled and activated another device. The prototype vibrated, then seemed to fold in upon itself, shrinking until it vanished entirely. Quantum compression, she explained. It's now stored as data within this device. Intruders in sublevel B. A voice announced over the facility's intercom. Security teams converge immediately. Our phase shift will fail in 2 minutes, Verena said. We need to leave now. They rushed back toward the maintenance shaft, but found their path blocked by armed security personnel flooding into the corridor. Another way? Dominic asked desperately. Verena grabbed his hand. Hold on. She activated a final device, and the world around them seemed to blur. Dominic felt a sensation of extreme acceleration, then a momentary weightlessness before they materialized on the ridge where they had started, beside his parked car. What just happened? He gasped, fighting a wave of nausea. Emergency extraction, Verena said, looking suddenly drained. Crude but effective. It's a one-use technology. We won't be able to do that again. In the distance, alarms continued to sound from the facility as vehicles began pouring from its gates. They'll be looking for us, Dominic said. Yes, Verena agreed grimly. And now we're officially enemies of your government. The desert highways stretched before them like a ribbon of asphalt through the red landscape. 3 days had passed since their escape from Research Station Omega. 3 days of constant movement and stolen moments of sleep in roadside motels, paid for with cash. They've frozen all your accounts, Verena said, studying a tablet she'd somehow connected to government systems. And there's an alert in the federal database flagging your identity. Dominic kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel of the used pickup truck they'd purchased from a no-questions-asked dealership in Nevada. Director Hawthorne. You mentioned that name before. Who is he? Thomas Hawthorne, Verena replied. Former military intelligence, now heading the government's extraterrestrial research division. He's been tracking anomalies like me for decades, and he's the one hunting us. Yes, he believes all alien contact represents a threat to national security. She looked out the window at the passing landscape. We need to reach the coordinates I showed you within 48 hours. The Nexus is approaching its formation point. Dominic nodded, feeling the weight of the compressed prototype in his pocket. They were heading for an abandoned satellite relay station in New Mexico, a location Verena had chosen for its powerful transmission equipment and remote location. There's a roadblock ahead, Verena suddenly warned, her senses apparently sharper than any human's. 3 miles. Military vehicles. Dominic slowed the truck. Options. Turn at the next dirt road. We'll detour through the old mining territory. Detour added hours to their journey, forcing them to navigate treacherous terrain as the sun set. When they finally stopped for the night, hiding the truck behind a rock formation, Dominic built a small fire while Verena scanned for pursuit. We should be safe until morning, she said, joining him by the fire. Her silvery clothing had been replaced with human attire, jeans, and a flannel shirt that made her look almost ordinary, except for those remarkable amber eyes. You still haven't told me everything, Dominic said, studying her across the flames. What happens after we activate the Nexus? What happens to Earth? Verena was silent for a long moment. The Nexus will create a permanent connection between our worlds. My people will send ships to rescue our stranded colonies and ... She hesitated. We would offer an alliance with Earth. An alliance. Knowledge exchange. Technology. Medicine. Cultural understanding. She met his gaze directly. Your world stands at a technological tipping point, Dominic. The next 100 years will determine whether you advance or destroy yourselves. We could help guide that advancement. And if Earth refuses, then we respect that decision and limit our Nexus use to emergency transit only. She looked up at the stars. Hope your leaders will see the benefits of cooperation. And these less benevolent entities you mentioned? Verena's expression darkened. The collectors. They harvest resources from developing worlds, including biological resources. If they detect the nexus forming, they might investigate. Is why we must stabilize it properly with your prototype rather than let your government's crude attempts continue. Dawn brought the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. They abandoned the campsite quickly, pushing the truck to its limits across the rough terrain until they reached a paved road again. By midday, they were approaching the outskirts of a small town when Verena suddenly tensed. Stopped the vehicle. Now, Dominic pulled over just as 3 black SUVs turned onto the road ahead of them, blocking their path. Hawthorne, Verena whispered. As if on cue, a tall man in a dark suit emerged from the center vehicle. Even at this distance, Dominic could see his military bearing and the cold determination in his stance. There's no way past them, Dominic said, scanning for escape routes. There is another way. Verena withdrew a small device from her pocket. This will transport both of us to the relay station instantly. Like the emergency extraction from the facility, similar but more precise? And ... double quotes, she hesitated. It will be detectable. They'll know exactly where we've gone. Dominic watched as the government agents began approaching their truck. Weapons drawn? We don't have a choice. Verena activated the device, and the world dissolved around them. They materialized inside an abandoned control room. Dust-covered equipment surrounding them. Through broken windows, Dominic could see satellite dishes aimed at the sky. Their once white surfaces now rust-streaked and weathered. We have maybe 30 minutes before they arrive, Verena said, already moving toward the main control panel. Help me connect the prototype. Together they worked feverishly, Dominic following Verena's instructions to integrate his quantum resonance engine with the station's transmission equipment. Outside, the sky began to darken unnaturally, swirling clouds forming directly overhead. The Nexus is responding to our preparations, Verena explained, her fingers flying over alien controls she had connected to the Earth's technology. It senses the stabilization frequency. Just as they completed the final connections, the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder. Through the windows, Dominic could see 3 military helicopters approaching, more vehicles racing across the desert floor toward the station. They're here, he said grimly. Verena looked up from the controls, her expression suddenly vulnerable. Dominic, there's something I haven't told you. What?
Activating the Nexus will create a stable pathway between our worlds.
But ... She met his eyes. Someone must remain at this end to maintain the calibration. For at least a year until permanent stabilizers can be installed. Dominic felt his heart sink. You never planned to go back.
Oh no,
she admitted softly. I volunteered for this mission, knowing it was one way. The doors to the control room burst open as armed agents flooded in, weapons trained on them. Director Hawthorne entered last, his cold eyes taking in the scene with calculated precision. Step away from the equipment, he ordered. Both of you. You don't understand what you're interfering with, Verena said, her hand still on the controls. This isn't a weapon or a threat. Director Hawthorne approached slowly, his agents spreading out to surround them. He was older than Dominic had expected, with silver hair and deep lines etched into his face, but his eyes held a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. I understand perfectly, Hawthorne replied. You're attempting to open a doorway to your world. A doorway that could just as easily allow invasion as cooperation. We have no interest in conquest, Verena insisted. So you claim. Hawthorne turned to Dominic. Mr. Reed, you've committed treason against your country, aided a foreign entity, and stolen classified technology. But I'm authorized to offer you full immunity if you step away from that console now. Dominic glanced at the activation sequence, nearly complete on the screen before him. One button would finish it. What will happen to her? He asked. That's not your concern, Hawthorne said coldly. Verena's amber eyes met Dominic's. Whatever you choose, I understand. The sky outside had darkened further, the swirling clouds now forming a visible vortex. Equipment throughout the station hummed with increasing power as the Nexus responded. To the prototype's frequency, you've seen her technology, Reed, Hawthorne pressed. Imagine what we could learn, how we could advance. Help us instead of them. The Nexus is forming whether you want it to or not, Verena said quietly. The only question is whether it forms stable or unstable. An unstable nexus could tear a hole in your atmosphere. Hawthorne signaled to his agents, "Take them." Agents moved forward. Dominic made his decision, slammed his hand down on the activation control. The room filled with blinding light as energy surged through the equipment. The agents fell back, shielding their eyes. Outside, the vortex in the sky expanded, a perfect circle of swirling energy forming directly above the station. "What have you done?" Hawthorne demanded, his composure cracking for the first time. "Saved both our worlds," Dominic answered. The light faded to a sustainable glow as the quantum resonance engine stabilized the nexus. Through the windows, you could see the vortex had transformed into what looked like a window into another sky, a sky with two suns and unfamiliar constellations. Verena stepped forward, addressing Hawthorne directly. "The nexus is stable. It will remain so as long as the prototype continues functioning. Now you have a choice, Director." "A choice?" Hawthorne asked suspiciously. "Approximately 12 minutes, a diplomatic vessel from my world will emerge from the nexus," Verena explained. "You can greet them with weapons drawn, beginning our relationship with hostility, or," she gestured to the console, "you can send a message of peaceful intent." Dominic moved to Verena's side. "Now this is bigger than National Security, Director. This is about humanity's future." For a long moment, Hawthorne was silent, his eyes moving between them, the glowing console, and the transformed sky outside. Finally, he lowered his hand, signaling his agents to lower their weapons. "How do I send this message?" he asked, as Verena showed Hawthorne the communication protocols. Dominic stepped to the window, watching the nexus shimmer against the darkening sky. His life had irrevocably changed in less than a week, from a disgraced engineer to someone who had just helped establish humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. "Someone still needs to maintain the calibration," Verena said, joining him at the window after finishing with Hawthorne. "For a year at least, I'll do it," Dominic replied without hesitation. Verena's expression softened. "You would stay, even knowing you'll be under constant surveillance, working with people who just called you a traitor?" "I designed the prototype. I understand it better than anyone else on Earth." He smiled slightly. "Besides, someone needs to make sure this alliance starts off right." Outside, a sleek vessel emerged from the nexus, its design unlike anything human engineers had conceived. It hovered above the station, waiting, requesting permission to land, one of Hawthorne's technicians announced. Now operating the communication equipment, all eyes turned to Hawthorne. The visible reluctance that slowly transformed into resolution. He nodded. "Grant permission." As preparations began for the historic landing, Verena took Dominic's hand. Her skin glowed faintly from within, and he realized she was beginning to shift back to her natural form now that secrecy was no longer necessary. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "The starlight pact between our worlds will change everything." Dominic watched as her features subtly transformed, becoming more luminous, more alien, yet somehow even more beautiful. "Will you stay too? As an ambassador?" "They'll have me," she replied, glancing at Hawthorne, who was watching them closely. While coordinating with his superiors via satellite phone, the alien ship descended slowly toward the makeshift landing area. Agents were frantically clearing outside the station. News helicopters had already appeared on the horizon, drawn by reports of the strange atmospheric phenomenon. "No going back now," Dominic murmured. Verena's transformed hand squeezed his, warm and reassuring, despite its alien appearance. "No going back," she agreed. "Only forward, together." As the ship touched down and the hatch began to open, revealing silhouettes of beings from another world, Dominic Reed, once a failed engineer, stood at humanity's threshold to the stars, ready to help write the next chapter of two civilizations. The Starlight Pact had begun.